Next up, what we're going to do is bust out a wood burner so that I can actually burn in the design for the Bear Flute, and then I'm going to put numbers on the ends so that I know what flute this is and who to ship it to whenever I sell it. Alright, so this actually is going to be the 71st flute that I've actually created. I'm just removing some of the moisture from in here so my Sharpie will actually be able to write something down on it. But 71st flute, so I'm going to go into here and I'm going to write right in here 71. There we go. I really don't have good handwriting at all. Another 71 right there. And lastly, for the burning, I am going to kind of mark where my other bear paws have been on flutes and kind of decide about how deep I'm going to make it. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this guy just to be sure, because I don't want to burn through the PVC since the PVC wall here is relatively thin. I could actually burn through into the head joint. So, since I don't want to do that, I think I'm going to use this method instead, where I hold the PVC up to the light. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not, but we'll see. I'll hold this to the light, and you can see that it shows how deep that the actual flute goes, or the joint goes. Which I made it pretty deep this time, which is nice. Gives it more room to wiggle around in. But with that, I'm going to make a mark. It's just basically like, don't go past this line. That's going to be the bottom of the bear paw, basically, just above that line. We're going to do one last thing while the wood burner heats up, and that is take a rasp and go around the inner side of this body end. So grab our wood burner. I'm going to test it out. I'm just going to put my hand close to it. See how hot it is. Seems pretty hot. And oof, I almost forgot. Whenever you're burning PVC, once the smell hit me, I would have realized it, even if I didn't. You do want to actually wear your mask and safety glasses, because the fumes of PVC is bad, and on top of that, the fumes will burn your eyes. So one thing that you'll notice about wood burning, and I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick it up, but you can see that it has a lot of like kind of residue that builds up on the ends of where you're burning. So I'll take my box cutter and I'll just kind of lightly shave off most of it. Not all of it, because if you start shaving off a whole bunch, it's not really going to show up anymore. Because the whole point is you're burning into it. If you shave it all away, it's not going to have the design on it anymore. So, there we go. I made the bear paw a little small this time around, which I don't hark myself too hard on because of the fact that it's freehand, and I'm not very good with handwriting, as I said before. And there we go. We got one last step before cleaning and then starting to prepare for staining and putting a finish on it. And that is sanding it down. Is that there's a lot of little fuzzums that kind of, it's sanded, but it hasn't exactly been sanded off. It's kind of pulled them up to the surface and created little hairs everywhere. So I'll take a lighter grain sandpaper and go over it again. Okay, now you can see that the fuzzums have kind of gone away, but I gotta wipe off the excess now. So now we're gonna clean up the flute. Alrighty, so in particular what we're going to need is some gloves, some wood stain or finish, or both in this case. I'm using the Polyshades by Minwax. I'm using specifically the Bombay Mahogany. It is more of a red color than a brown color, so this is where we get our red color from. It honestly does look like a really good color. I've been experimenting with other brands though. In particular, there is a clear water-based finish that seems to be working a little bit better. So I'm going to try this out on this flute and future flutes and so on and see how it works. But to begin, we're just going to go ahead and put these gloves on. Alright, we're going to grab our stirring stick and can opener. And we're going to go ahead and stir this guy. Alright. Now I find that whenever I make these flutes, the joint here is just enough to grab onto without getting my hand actually on the flute itself. But for the other, I've repurposed some of my old test flutes whenever I was figuring out how to make these in the first place as handles, like little makeshift handles. So I'll put this guy on here, and you'll see that now I have a handle to grab onto without touching the flute. Particularly, I kind of look for if it's looking in a direction, like kind of leaning in a direction, I'll make the lean go down so that whenever I set it down on the surface that I need to, it'll rest at that position instead of rolling around to where it wants to be. So we take our first layer. I'm gonna lift it up slightly here so you guys can see it a little bit better as I'm brushing it on. But take our first layer, about this much or so. It's going to be really light at first, so we're kind of putting a decent amount on here comparatively. I think we'll go for a second dip, honestly, because the brush itself is not really saturated as of yet. One thing that we're going to do is avoid the tone holes first, and then as well go over the end flare, because it can sometimes get hard to get into those corners. Now that we've got a lot on here, we'll go ahead and start spreading it around the tone holes. And we're going to start pushing from the top to the bottom. Just like so. That way it'll get an even coat all the way throughout. It'll look a little bit more like wood grain. Now we're going to move this into the living room. Do the same thing, kind of avoid the embouchure hole this time around. And with the bear paw, it kind of has a little bit of trouble actually getting into that area, so I'll dab it a little bit and then continue. Get in that corner and then start brushing in one direction, bottom to top, or the other direction if you feel so necessary. And there we go. Looks a little something like this. I'm going to put it to the side. And now we wait for 6 hours, which is a long time, but it takes what it takes. The wood finish stays on the most as of any other paint or finish or anything like that. And I think part of it is the 6-hour wait time. So we're going to close this up. I'm going to wait 6 hours, get to actually coloring the wedge whenever we're doing the inside of the flutes. Whenever we're applying the stain, we're going to put 4 layers on the outside and the inside. So 8 layers total of the colored finish and wood stain. So what we're going to be doing with the fourth layer is switching over from the Bombay Mahogany to the Mission Oak. This will be more of a brown color so that it will actually deepen the color of the red altogether. You don't want it to be just a solid red color because that doesn't really look like wood. So I used the very last layer on the outside and the inside, which would be the fourth coat, to use the Mission Oak to give it more of a nice full color. So what I'm doing here is grabbing a flute cleaning rod that I got from a classical or modern flute, so that, you know, the kind of concert metal flutes that you get. It's just from an old flute that I have that I repurposed for this, where I put a piece of paper towel inside of the flute cleaning rod and then put it into the finish and rubbing it throughout the inside in order to actually coat the inside. And what I'm doing here is actually taking a bit of Q-tip that I cut the end of the Q-tip off, and I actually dip it into the wood stain and wood finish and rub it along the inside of the tone holes and embouchure hole to get all the places that I missed. And honestly, whenever it comes to these parts of the flute, you just need one layer so that it matches the rest of it and there's no white bits anywhere that are showing. What you'll see me using here for the very last coat of the outside and inside of the flute is a clear gloss called General Finishes Endurovar. It's a water-based urethane. It's quite a bit more expensive than the other finishes, but since I'm just doing one layer on the flute and it makes the life of the flute last a lot longer when it comes to its wood stain, I consider it worth it, honestly.